By the time Nora Bennett found herself standing barefoot in 3 inches of black basement water, it was already too late to pretend her life had only cracked. It had collapsed. The storm had rolled over Cincinnati just after midnight, slamming sleet against the old windows of the house on Marlowe Street hard enough to sound like handfuls of gravel. Upstairs, her 9-year-old son Eli was asleep on a mattress laid directly on the floor, wrapped in 2 quilts and wearing his winter coat because the radiators had gone cold before sunset. On the kitchen counter, beneath a dim bulb that flickered every few seconds, sat a red notice from Hamilton County warning that if the delinquent taxes on the property weren't paid within 28 days, the house could be placed on the next tax lien sale. $3,842.17. Nora had $211 in checking, $11 in cash, half a loaf of bread, 1 can of tomato soup, and a voicemail from her brother offering to take that burden off your hands for $12,000 if she signed by Friday. And below the stairs, half hidden behind a rusted shelving unit and a stack of cracked paint cans, there was a narrow door set into the basement wall. Solid oak. No knob. Just an old brass keyhole and a strip of peeling green paint, so old it looked like dried moss. She hadn't seen it when she first moved in. Maybe because she hadn't wanted to see it. Maybe because grief makes people blind. Now the floodwaters swirled around her ankles, cold as melted knives, and the beam of her flashlight trembled over that door again. Worthless, Derek had called this house. A joke of an inheritance. But her father had never been careless with words, and 2 weeks before he died, in a morphine-thin whisper she almost thought she imagined, he had grabbed her wrist and said, "If he leaves you, Marlowe, don't let him rush you. There's a room below. You'll understand." She hadn't understood then. She did now. Because a worthless house didn't come with a locked room in the basement. And a man with nothing left to hide didn't die warning his daughter to wait before selling. What was hidden there? Why had her father never told her more? And why had Derek been so eager to buy it before she'd even spent a full night inside? In a moment, you'll see why the cheapest thing in Nora Bennett's life turned out to be the most expensive lie her family ever built. Get ready, because everything her brother thought he buried was about to rise through the floor. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who should have protected you, this story is for you. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or handed the leftovers while someone else smiled and took the prize, stay with me. If you've ever had to start over with shaking hands and no safety net, you already know this truth. What people call worthless is sometimes only waiting for the right person to uncover it. And some doors are locked to keep people out. Others are locked to keep the truth alive. Nora was 37 years old when her father died, and tired in the kind of way sleep can't fix. Not dramatic tired. Not movie tired. Bone tired. Bill tired. Grief tired. The kind of tired that settles behind your eyes after too many years of doing what has to be done while everyone around you praises someone else for doing almost nothing at all. For most of her adult life, she had lived in motion. School drop-offs. Double shifts. Pharmacy runs. Copay calculations scribbled on the backs of envelopes. Late-night loads of laundry. 5-minute cries in parked cars. She worked as a patient care assistant at Mercy West, making just over $23 an hour on paper and somehow less in real life after taxes, parking fees, school lunch payments, inhaler refills, and the endless little expenses that chewed through each week like mice in the walls. She wasn't careless. She wasn't lazy. She simply lived too close to the edge for too long. After her husband Ben was killed by a distracted driver on I-75 4 years earlier, Nora had never really been allowed the luxury of falling apart. Ben had been 38, broad-shouldered, warm-handed, always smelling faintly of cedar dust from the custom cabinet shop where he worked. One rainy Thursday in October, he left to pick up a sheet of maple plywood and never came home. By the time Nora reached the hospital, there was already a chaplain waiting in a navy blazer with sympathetic eyes and a script he had probably repeated 100 times. After that, life became arithmetic. Rent, $1,180. After-school care, $290. Gas, unpredictable. Groceries, never low enough. Eli's asthma inhaler, $62 with insurance, $184 without. Her father Arthur's prescriptions after the stroke, Another rotating list of numbers she learned by heart. Nora sold Ben's fishing gear first. Then his spare tools. Then the silver bracelet he had bought her on their 10th anniversary, the one with tiny engraved leaves along the clasp. She never sold her wedding ring, but she came close twice. Still, she kept showing up. That mattered to her. It mattered maybe more than it should have. Nora was the kind of person who believed presence counted. That if you stayed, if you lifted, if you cleaned wounds and paid bills and answered midnight calls and remembered every birthday and every dosage and every favorite soup, then somehow life would see you. Maybe not reward you exactly, but at least not erase you. That was her mistake. Arthur Bennett had owned Bennett Hardware on Gilbert Avenue in Walnut Hills for 39 years. It wasn't one of those polished boutique hardware stores with scented candles and $12 succulents by the register. It was a real one. Narrow aisles, warped oak floors, dust on the high shelves, buckets of nails sold by the pound, brass house keys hanging in rows that clicked together like tiny bells when someone brushed past. In winter, the radiators hissed. In summer, the back office smelled like hot paper, machine oil, and the old box fan Arthur refused to replace because, according to him, if it still spins, it still works. As a girl, Nora had loved that place. She loved the roughness of it, the order hidden inside the clutter, the handwritten labels in her grandfather's square, disciplined script. She loved that every drawer opened onto something useful: screws, hinges, washers, twine, gasket rubber, tiny bulbs in wax paper sleeves. When she was 10, Arthur taught her how to count change by listening to coins hit the glass counter. When she was 14, she could carry 2 gallons of paint at once and knew the difference between masonry drill bits and wood augers faster than most grown men. By 16, she was balancing the Saturday register and sweeping sawdust from the floor after close. "It'll all mean something one day," Arthur used to tell her. He said it when she learned inventory. He said it when she ran the books during tax season. He said it on quiet evenings when the light slanted through the front windows and turned the dust golden. It'll all mean something one day. Derek, 2 years younger, never cared for the store unless there was attention attached to it. He was handsome in the easy, practiced way some men are handsome because they have spent their whole lives using it. He learned quickly where praise lived and how to walk toward it. If Arthur needed someone to help unload pressure-treated lumber on a humid July afternoon, Derek had a game, a date, a meeting, a reason. But if a neighbor came by praising Arthur's smart boy for getting his real estate license at 24, Derek somehow appeared from nowhere, grinning like he'd built the city himself. Nora never hated him when they were young. Not at first. She covered for him, defended him, loaned him gas money he forgot to repay, told herself that families came unevenly built and love was supposed to stretch around the missing parts. When their mother Rose died of ovarian cancer at 46, Nora was 16 and Derek was 14, and for a brief, raw season, grief made them softer with each other. They sat on the back steps and said nothing. They passed tissues without speaking. They learned how quiet a house could become after one person stopped moving through it. But Derek's grief turned sharp and impatient. Nora's turned dutiful. Arthur noticed duty. He also exploited it. That's the part people never say out loud about the responsible one. The dependable child gets praised in public and leaned on in private until she no longer knows where love ends and labor begins. After Arthur's stroke, Nora became the hinge holding 2 households together. She drove from her apartment in Cheviot to Arthur's place in East Walnut Hills before dawn to lay out his morning pills. Then she drove Eli to school. Then she worked a shift at the hospital. Then she went back to Arthur's to check his blood pressure, change bedding, pay utility bills, sort mail, and stand in the doorway while physical therapists explained exercises Derek promised to learn and never did. Derek came on Sundays sometimes. He brought bakery cookies in white boxes tied with string. He kissed Arthur's forehead. He made loud, affectionate jokes. He asked just enough questions to sound involved. If Nora mentioned an unpaid contractor invoice or a leak at one of the rental properties, he would widen his eyes, laugh softly, and say, "You worry too much, Nora. I've got it." Then he would leave in his dark blue BMW with the cream leather seats and a real estate logo on the back window. He always had it. Until the actual work began. Then somehow Nora had it again. She remembered one November evening 3 months before Arthur died. The temperature had dropped to 27 degrees, and the old man's fingers had gone waxy and stiff. Nora was rubbing warmth back into his hands when Arthur stared past her shoulder toward the window and said, "Your mother wanted the Marlowe house kept in the family." Nora frowned. "The empty one?" Arthur nodded once. "That place is falling apart," she said. "Derek says the foundation's gone." Arthur made a dismissive sound. "Derek says many things." "Then why keep it?" The pause. "The right things survive in strange places," he murmured. Nora almost asked more, but Eli started coughing in the other room, and the moment dissolved into the usual noise of care. A thermometer beeped. Arthur grimaced. Someone called from the pharmacy. The night moved on. She didn't know it yet, but that half-finished sentence was a map. At the time, Marlowe was just an address with dust on it. 742 Marlowe Street sat in East Price Hill on a steep block where the houses leaned into the hill like tired shoulders. Built in 1919, it had once belonged to Nora's grandfather Samuel Bennett, a mason with a habit of overbuilding everything. The house was narrow but sturdy, brick on the outside, old-growth timber underneath, with a slate roof that looked black when wet and silver when the winter sun hit it right. Rose had grown up there. Nora remembered childhood Christmases in the parlor when the radiator clanged and the windows wept from the heat. After Samuel died, Arthur rented the place for a while. Then it sat empty longer and longer. "Needs too much," he would say whenever Nora asked why he didn't sell. "New wiring. New plumbing. Roof repairs. Drainage work. Probably mold." Derek called it the haunted tax bill. And yet Arthur never listed it. Never let contractors gut it. Never handed it over to Derek's developer friends, even when property values in the neighborhood began climbing. That should have meant something. But grief rearranges priorities. By the spring before Arthur died, Nora was too busy keeping everyone breathing to investigate old houses and unfinished comments. She was sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. Eli had started pretending not to notice when she skipped dinner. Her checking account hovered between desperate and worse. Her landlord raised the rent by $90. The transmission in her 2014 Honda shuddered whenever she crossed 35 miles per hour. At work, she missed a certification class that would have brought a raise because Derek texted at 6:12 that morning saying, "Dad fell, can you go?" He had not fallen. Arthur had simply refused breakfast and Derek didn't want him upset. Nora stayed anyway, because that was what she did. And all the while Derek grew smoother, richer looking, better dressed. He started using phrases like portfolio strategy and repositioning assets. He brought folders to Arthur's house and closed the den door while they spoke. When Nora asked what he was working on, he smiled without showing his teeth. "Cleaning things up," he said. "Cleaning up what?" "Dad's estate planning. You know, before it becomes a mess." Then he added, lightly, almost kindly, "Not everyone is built to manage property, Nora. You've got enough on your plate." That line stayed with her. Not because it was cruel on its face. Because it was polished. Prepared. It had the softness of something repeated more than once. Arthur died on a Tuesday at 4:18 in the morning. The nurse from hospice called while Nora was spooning instant coffee into a chipped mug. By 4:47 she had Eli bundled in the back seat under a blanket and was driving through wet streets, shining under amber lights. Derek arrived 20 minutes later in a camel coat that still carried the Pricefold crease on one sleeve. He cried loudly in the doorway. Nora cried quietly while signing paperwork. It felt, even then, like a rehearsal for what would follow. The funeral took place on a gray Saturday with freezing rain that needled through umbrellas and turned the cemetery paths slick. Arthur had asked for no flowers, only donations to the church roof fund, but Derek sent an arrangement anyway, white lilies in a spray so large it blocked half the front pew. During the reception in the church basement, women Nora had known since childhood touched her elbow and said, "Your father leaned on you so much, and he was lucky to have you." A few glanced toward Derek in his tailored black coat and added, "Of course, your brother handled so much too." Nora didn't correct them. She was too tired. The will reading happened 5 days later in a probate attorney's office on the 8th floor of a beige building downtown, The kind with stale heat and framed prints of rowers on rivers. Nora arrived straight from a morning shift, still wearing scrub shoes because her other boots had split at the heel. Derek was already there with his wife Vanessa, who wore pearl earrings the size of marbles and held a paper cup of coffee like she was posing in a real estate brochure. The attorney, Martin Cole, had smooth gray hair and the careful expression of a man who billed in 6-minute increments. He adjusted his glasses, opened a folder, and began reading in the neutral voice professionals use when they want to stay outside the blast radius of other people's pain. Arthur's personal bank accounts and investment accounts were left to Derek. The hardware store, including business interests and operating control, went to Derek. The duplex on Madison Road and the 4-unit building near Woodburn Avenue went to Derek. Arthur's truck went to Derek. A coin collection Nora had never seen went to Derek. To Nora, Arthur left 742 Marlowe Street, together with its contents, as is, with all related liabilities and obligations. Nora actually looked up, waiting for the rest. There was no rest. No cash gift. No equalization clause. No distribution from the business she had helped run since childhood. Just the old house. The one with the unpaid taxes. The one with the bad roof. The one Derek had spent years calling worthless. For a moment the room went soundless, as if the air itself had stepped back. Then Vanessa gave a small, sympathetic pout and said, "I'm sure he had his reasons." Nora turned to Martin Cole. "That's it?" He cleared his throat. "There is also a bequest of your mother's cedar blanket chest and certain family photographs within the Marlowe property." "That's not what I asked." Cole glanced at Derek, then back at the page. "This is the executed instrument dated 6 months ago." 6 months ago. Arthur had been in and out of confusion 6 months ago. On 2 different medications that made him drowsy. Recovering from a fall. Nora knew that timeline the way sailors know weather. She looked at Derek. "You were with him then?" Derek leaned back in his chair, all calm posture and polished grief. "I helped him get his affairs in order. I was there every day. And I was handling the long-term issues," he said. "Dad knew that." Nora felt heat rise under her skin despite the office chill. "I changed his bandages. I paid his pharmacy bills when his debit card froze. I missed work to take him to appointments. I took care of him." Derek's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "And he appreciated that. This house gives you something tangible. A place to start over." "A place?" she repeated. "It's half collapsed." "It's property," Vanessa said softly, like she was offering wisdom. "A lot of people would be grateful." Nora stared at her. Then back at Derek. "Did he say why?" Nora asked. Derek held her gaze. "He said I knew how to protect what he built." That sentence landed harder than the will. Protect what he built. As if Nora had only tended bodies and dishes and school forms and unpaid invoices while the real things, the meaningful things, the valuable things, had belonged to the men. She pushed back her chair so fast it scraped the floor. Martin Cole lifted a hand. "Ms. Bennett, if you wish to contest the instrument, there are procedures, but probate litigation can be lengthy and expensive." "Expensive," Nora repeated. Of course it could be contested. If she had $10,000 for a retainer. If she had time. If she had childcare, savings, emotional bandwidth, some hidden reserve of energy no one had already spent for her. Derek stood too, voice lower now. "Nora, don't do this here." She laughed once. It came out like a crack in glass. "Here is exactly where this is." After that, the elevator ride down felt longer than the reading itself. Derek followed her into the lobby and caught her just before the revolving doors. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "I know you're upset. You know nothing." He glanced at the wet street outside, then back at her. "The house is a headache. If you want, I can take it off your hands. Family price. Quick close. No fees." Nora stared at him. "Right after the will reading? I'm trying to help." "You're trying to make sure I never look inside." Something flashed across his face then, fast, almost too fast to catch. Annoyance? Alarm? It vanished in an instant. "You always think everything is a conspiracy when life doesn't go your way." Nora stepped closer. You always talk like that when you're hiding something. Vanessa appeared behind him, hand on his arm. This is grief talking. No, Nora said quietly. Grief would have been kinder. She walked out into the freezing rain with her scrub shoes soaking through in less than 20 seconds and felt, for the first time in years, something colder than exhaustion. Suspicion. But suspicion didn't pay lawyers. And suspicion didn't keep a child warm. Within 3 weeks, Nora was out of options. Her landlord had already leased her apartment to a younger couple willing to sign at the new rate. She asked for a month. He offered 10 days. She checked prices on every small rental she could find within school district range of Eli's elementary, and most of them vanished before she could even call back. One basement unit in Westwood had bars on the windows and smelled like bleach and fried onions. The landlord wanted first month, last month, and a deposit. A one-bedroom in Northside was listed at $1,250 and the broker called it cozy, which in real estate meant small enough to ruin a family. Meanwhile, the estate transferred Marlowe into her name. Worthless or not, it was a roof. Nora signed the utility transfer papers with hands that hurt from working double shifts, borrowed a friend's pickup for one Saturday, and moved into the house with Eli, 3 lamps, 2 mattresses, 6 boxes of clothes, a saucepan, a coffee maker missing its lid, Ben's old tool bag, and the cedar chest Arthur had left her like a footnote. The first thing she smelled when she opened the front door was wet plaster and cold dust. The second thing was old wood. Not decay, exactly. The kind that clings to houses built before people started making things to be disposable. Still, the place looked rougher inside than she remembered. Wallpaper peeled in the dining room in long curls like sunburned skin. The kitchen linoleum had cracked near the stove. One upper cabinet door hung a full inch lower than the other. In the front parlor, there was an oval stain on the ceiling where rain had seeped through the slate roof and dried in rusty rings. The boiler in the basement made a noise like someone clearing a throat and then stopped altogether the first night. Eli stood in the middle of the living room holding his backpack and said, "Are we really living here?" "For a while," Nora said. He looked toward the boarded side window. "Is it safe?" That question cut deeper than he knew. Nora smiled anyway. "It will be." He nodded like he wanted to believe her more than he actually did. That's what children do when they love you. They loan you faith while you are running out of your own. The first week was all triage. She bought 2 plastic tarps, roofing nails, and a tube of sealant from a discount salvage place for $41.73. She paid a neighborhood handyman named Luis $50 cash to help her patch the worst leak before another rain. She restarted gas service for $86.43, but the boiler still coughed itself dead, and the technician quoted her $690 just to replace the igniter and clean the burner assembly, assuming nothing worse was wrong. Nothing worse was a fantasy. By day 6, she had learned the kitchen sink only drained properly if the upstairs bathroom faucet was left dripping. By day 7, the back door swelled in the frame whenever it rained and had to be shoulder-checked from the inside. The refrigerator worked only on setting 3, for froze the milk, and 2 let it sour. When the temperature dropped to 19 degrees overnight, frost bloomed in lace patterns on the inside edges of the upstairs windows. But then there were the little things. The surprising things. The hallway banister was walnut, solid and smooth from a century of hands. The dining room had pocket doors hidden under layers of paint. The floorboards in Eli's room, once cleaned, glowed honey gold beneath the grime. In the kitchen, behind a false panel, Nora found an old spice shelf Rose had once shown her when she was little. There were still pencil marks inside one cabinet recording heights by date. Rose, 1989. Nora, 1994. Derek, 1 line lower, written in Rose's looping hand with a tiny smiley face beside it. The house was wounded, but it was not empty, and that made losing it harder to imagine. Derek called on the 8th day. Nora almost didn't answer, but Eli was doing homework at the table and she didn't want him hearing the phone buzz itself into tension. "How's the palace?" Derek asked. "What do you want?" A sigh, practiced and patient. "I heard from a guy I know that the boiler is gone." "You heard from a guy you know?" "It's a small world." "No, it's a small city. You're still not answering. He paused. Look, I'm trying to give you a fair exit before this gets uglier. Houses like that eat cash. Insurance, code, taxes. I know how bills work. Then you know 12,000 is generous. Nora gripped the phone tighter. The taxes alone are almost 4. Exactly. You'll come out ahead. There it was again. Too eager. Too polished. Too early. Why do you want it? She asked. I don't. I want to help you. That's not the same sentence. His voice cooled by 2 degrees. You're making this emotional. And you're making it suspicious. The beat. Then he said, Dad knew what he was doing. Did he? Yes. Then why did he tell me not to let you rush me? Silence. Tiny. Chirp. Then Derek laughed once, but it sounded forced. You're hearing ghosts now? No. I'm finally hearing you. She hung up before he could answer. That's when everything changed. Because once Nora admitted to herself that Derek might be afraid of something, the house stopped feeling like a burden and started feeling like evidence. She began looking with different eyes. Not treasure hunt eyes. Not fantasy eyes. Practical eyes. The kind she used at the hospital when a patient said they were fine but their lips were a little too gray, their breathing a little too shallow, their answers a little too delayed. She knew how to read what people tried not to show. Houses, she discovered, were not very different. She noticed first that the square footage listed in the county assessor records, 1,486, felt wrong. The front parlor alone seemed larger than she remembered, and the basement footprint didn't match the upstairs rooms cleanly. There was extra depth somewhere, hidden behind finished walls and old storage spaces. Then she found old receipts tucked into a drawer in the dining room sideboard. Coal delivery slips from 1948. A plumbing invoice from 1962. A handwritten repair note in Samuel Bennett's hand mentioning dry room latch adjusted and check seal before frost. Dry room? The basement itself was divided strangely. Main utility area. Coal bin. Canning shelves. Then a section behind metal storage racks where the wall jogged inward in a way that didn't align with the foundation outside. Nora ran her palm over the brick and felt cooler air along one seam. Eli came downstairs one afternoon carrying a flashlight and said, Mom, there's a weird shape there. He pointed to the far wall behind the shelves. At first she saw only shadow. Then the outline came into focus. Rectangular. Vertical. A door frame hidden under paint, grime, and years of not being looked at. No handle. Just that small brass keyhole. Was that always there? Eli whispered. Nora's pulse kicked once. I don't know. Can we open it? Not today. He looked disappointed, but also relieved. Children sense when adults are trying not to be afraid. Nora didn't tell him that for the rest of that evening she could think of almost nothing else. Not while heating canned chili. Not while checking his homework. Not while wrapping towels along the base of the back door to stop the draft. A door in the basement of a worthless house. A father's dying warning. A brother desperate to buy quickly. A repair note mentioning a dry room. Some doors are locked to keep people out. Others are locked to keep the truth alive. She repeated that to herself without fully knowing why. The next morning delivered a fresh complication. A certified envelope. Hamilton County Treasurer's Office. Inside was a formal delinquency notice stating the Marlowe property had outstanding taxes from 2 prior years, interest continuing to accrue, and failure to cure could result in a lien sale after statutory notice. The amount due by the end of the month, $3,842.17. Not theoretical now. Calendar real. Court real. Lose the house real. Nora sat at the kitchen table and did the math twice. If she sold the Honda, maybe $2,000 on a good day, but then how would she get to work? If she picked up 2 extra weekend shifts, maybe another $480 before taxes, but Eli would need care and the school holiday schedule was coming. If she pawned the wedding ring, she might get something, but probably not enough. If she borrowed from friends, she'd still come up short, and the shame of asking felt heavier than the ring itself. Eli came in wearing 1 red sock and 1 blue one and stopped when he saw her face. Is it bad? He asked. Nora folded the notice. It's grown up bad. You thought about that. Can I help? Her throat tightened. You already do. That afternoon, at the grocery store, her debit card was declined for $47.18 because an automatic payment she forgot had posted overnight. She stood there while the cashier, no older than 19, waited politely and the woman behind her sighed. Nora removed the eggs first, then the apples, then the shredded cheese, until the total fell to $28.04 and the card finally went through. Outside, wind knifed through the parking lot. She sat in the Honda with a bag holding bread, pasta, oatmeal, and peanut butter and cried into the steering wheel for exactly 90 seconds because that was all the time she had before school pickup. Rock bottom rarely looks dramatic when you're inside it. It looks like subtraction. One thing removed after another until your life becomes a list of what you can no longer afford to lose. At work, gossip found her before relief did. Someone had heard about the will from someone at church who heard it from Vanessa. By lunch, 2 women from billing were whispering near the microwave about how the son got the business and the daughter got the old place. One of them noticed Nora entering and lowered her voice too late. Humiliation has a sound. It sounds like a sentence cut in half when you walk into a room. Nora ate crackers from her locker and stared at the vending machine until her break ended. That evening, the first real snow came early and wet, sticking to branches and dragging power lines lower. Eli developed a cough by bedtime. Not severe, but enough to make Nora listen through the wall every 20 minutes between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock, counting breaths the way she had learned to do for Arthur. At 2:13 a.m., a metallic thud echoed from the basement. Not pipes. Not the boiler. Something looser. Hollower. Nora sat up in the dark, every muscle suddenly awake. Then came another sound. A soft tap, then a scrape. She grabbed Ben's flashlight from the nightstand, wrapped her cardigan tight, and went downstairs barefoot because fear doesn't wait for slippers. The kitchen floor was cold enough to sting. At the basement door she stopped, listening. Nothing. Only the quiet hum of old wiring and the faint hiss of sleet against glass. She told herself it was shifting shelves. Wood contracting. Nothing alive. Nothing irrational. Still, she didn't go down. Not then. Instead, she stood in the dark and thought about the hidden door until dawn turned the window gray. By morning, she was angry with herself. Not because she'd been afraid. Because fear had started making decisions in a house she now depended on. So she made a plan. Saturday, after Eli's basketball clinic at the community center, she would clear the basement wall and inspect the door properly. If it opened, good. If not, she'd call a locksmith. If there was nothing behind it, fine. At least the question would stop chewing through her thoughts. But life rarely lets answers arrive on schedule. Friday afternoon, Derek showed up in person. Nora saw his BMW through the front curtains and felt immediate irritation, which sharpened into something else when she noticed he had not come alone. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses on despite the cloud cover, and Derek carried a flat folder under one arm. Nora opened the door but kept the chain on. What are you doing here? He smiled. Checking on you. No, you aren't. I brought papers. That's exactly why you're not. Vanessa leaned across from the car and called, It's a standard purchase agreement. Very simple. Nora laughed without humor. Of course it is. Derek lowered his voice, shifting into that intimate tone manipulative people use when they want their pressure mistaken for concern. Nora, look around. This house is killing you. Eli needs stability. I can wire $5,000 at signing and the rest within 48 hours. Why the rush? It's not a rush. It's practical. You had years to be practical about this place. His smile thinned. And you've had enough time to realize sentiment doesn't fix foundations. She almost shut the door then. But anger kept her still. Tell me something, she said. If this house is such a disaster, why do you want it so badly? Derek's jaw flexed. Because I'm trying to stop you from drowning. No, Nora said. You're standing on the dock asking me to sign a paper while I'm in the water. He held out the folder. Just read it. She didn't move. Behind him, Vanessa said, You really should think about what your father would have wanted. Nora's whole body went cold. My father wanted many things, she said. One of them, apparently, was for me not to trust how quickly you smile. Then she shut the door. The next sound was Derek's palm hitting the wood once, flat and hard. Nora. She slid the chain free and opened it again just 3 inches. If you come back without being invited, I'm calling the police. For the first time, the friendliness dropped completely from his face. He looked at the cracked porch paint, the sagging gutter, the patched roofline, then back at her. You always confuse stubbornness with strength, he said. Nora met his eyes. And you always confuse confidence with ownership. She closed the door for good. Eli, who had been halfway down the stairs, whispered, "Was Uncle Derek mad?" Nora inhaled slowly. "Yes." "Are we in trouble?" She looked at her son. Thin shoulders inside a hand-me-down sweatshirt. Pencil marks on his fingers. Hair still damp from washing. Too young to carry any of this. Old enough to feel it anyway. "We're in a hard chapter," she said. "That's not the same thing." He nodded. Children remember lines like that. Years later, sometimes they build their lives around them. Saturday morning brought a hard blue sky and a temperature of 22 degrees. The kind of winter light that makes everything look honest and unforgiving at the same time. Nora dropped Eli at basketball, drove to a pawn shop on Glenway Avenue, and stood under fluorescent lights while a man with nicotine-stained fingers examined her wedding ring through a loop. "I can do $350, he said. She almost said yes. Instead she closed her hand around the ring and took it back. Not because sentiment outweighed survival. Because she had already lost too many things that mattered and gotten too little in return. She drove home with the ring still in her pocket and a new, raw sense that the line between dignity and desperation had grown dangerously thin. By noon she was in the basement wearing work gloves, a knit hat, and Ben's old canvas jacket over 2 sweaters. The air down there smelled of concrete, rust, and something faintly sweet beneath it, cedar, maybe, long buried under damp. She moved boxes first. Then the empty canning jars. Then the bent metal shelving unit that shrieked across the floor when she dragged it aside. Dust rose in gray ribbons. Brick emerged. And there it was. The full shape of the door. About 5 feet high and less than 3 feet wide, built directly into the inner wall, edges sealed long ago with careful trim work that had later been painted over. No knob. No hinges visible on the outside. Only the brass keyhole and a tiny clover-shaped mark carved into the frame. Nora froze. She had seen that mark before. On Samuel Bennett's old Mason toolbox. And on the underside of the hardware store's original front counter, where Rose once told her Samuel had marked anything he considered built to last. Eli came home at 1:40 and found her still staring at it. "Did you open it?" "Not yet." "Can I see?" He stepped closer, flashlight beam hopping with excitement. "That's creepy." "Helpful," Nora said. He grinned for the first time all day, then looked more carefully. "Do we have a key?" Nora wished she knew. That evening she went through every drawer in the kitchen, every tin, every jar of loose screws, every hook by the back door. Nothing. In the cedar chest she found blankets, Rose's recipe cards, a pressed corsage from a long-ago school dance, and an envelope of family photos. One showed Rose standing on the Marlowe front porch in 1987, pregnant with Derek, smiling into summer light. Behind her, barely visible through the basement window grate, was a shadow that could have been shelves. Or another wall. Or the hint of a room behind the room. Nora turned the picture over. Rose had written in blue ink, "Home keeps what people forget." Nora read that sentence 3 times. Home keeps what people forget. Not long after, while carrying the cedar chest back upstairs, she heard a dry rattle from somewhere inside the bottom panel. She set it down, looked underneath, and found that one board had been repaired later with smaller brass nails. She pried gently with a butter knife. The panel loosened. Inside was a narrow compartment lined in faded felt. And inside that compartment lay a single brass key wrapped in wax paper gone translucent with age. Nora just stared. Eli, kneeling beside her, whispered, "Them." There was also a folded note. Not Rose's handwriting. Arthur's. The letters were shaky, written with the hesitation of a hand no longer fully obedient. "For the room below." If it comes to her, let her see everything before anyone else does. No signature. No explanation. Just that. Nora sat back on the floor, so suddenly the old boards knocked beneath her. Eli looked from the note to the key and back again, eyes wide. Is that for the basement? I think so. Should we open it now? The smart answer was no. Wait until morning. Wait until someone else is present. Wait until your hands stop shaking. But life had already delayed too much. Truth had already waited too long. And the note used one word that mattered more than anything else: everything. Nora looked at the stairwell descending toward the cold basement dark. Then at her son. Get your flashlight, she said. The basement felt different that night. Not colder. More awake. The kind of charged stillness that fills a courtroom before a verdict or a church before someone starts singing. Nora told Eli to stand back while she crouched at the door and slid the key into the brass lock. If it. Not loosely. Perfectly. Old metal turned against old mechanism with a resistance that sounded almost human, like a chest exhaling after holding breath for years. One click. Then another, deeper one. Nora pressed the hidden edge. At first nothing happened. Then with a low scrape, the door released inward. A draft of dry air touched her face. In a basement that smelled of damp and rust and winter seepage, the room behind the door smelled dry. Cedar. Paper. Dust that had been protected, not neglected. Nora lifted the flashlight. The beam cut into darkness and found shelves. A narrow room, maybe 6 feet by 10, lined with old wood slats and insulated in some way that had kept moisture out for decades. On the left stood a steel file cabinet with 3 drawers. On the right, a workbench covered in an oilcloth sheet. Straight ahead, stacked wooden document boxes. On the floor, a cracked leather case. Everything coated in fine gray dust, yes, but intact. Untouched. Preserved. Eli whispered, "This was here the whole time?" Nora could barely answer. Yes. And for the first time since the will reading, fear changed shape inside her. It became hope. Not certainty. Not relief. Something more dangerous. The possibility that Derek had not won cleanly. She stepped inside. The floorboards flexed once, then held. The first thing she uncovered from the workbench was an old tape recorder wrapped in cloth. Beside it sat 4 microcassettes, each labeled in Arthur's handwriting with dates from the last year of his life. Next to those lay a yellow legal envelope sealed with brittle tape and marked in block letters. For Nora only. Her throat went tight so fast it hurt. She set the envelope down. Too much at once, she told herself. Breathe. Look carefully. Don't rush. On the top document box was another clover mark, Samuels. Inside were ledgers. Rent rolls. Insurance papers. Survey maps tied with cotton ribbon. At the very bottom, inside a wax sleeve, lay an original deed packet with the address 742 Marlowe Street, and another parcel number Nora did not recognize. She unfolded the survey map with trembling fingers. The house lot. And behind it, running along the alley with separate street access, a narrow adjoining parcel Arthur had never mentioned. 22 feet wide. 96 feet deep. Zoned mixed-use decades earlier when the neighborhood planning map changed. Nora stared. Even without touching anything else, the house was not just a crumbling single lot. It included a second parcel. Developable land. Frontage Derek had never disclosed. What is it? Eli asked. Nora swallowed. It means this place was never as worthless as he said. But that was only the beginning. Because when she finally opened the yellow envelope, the real shock was not financial. It was personal. Inside was a notarized trust document dated August 14, 2002. Rose Bennett Family Trust. Primary beneficiary upon maturity at age 35. Nora Rose Bennett. Assets listed in Schedule A included 51% beneficial interest in Bennett Hardware and Supply, the Gilbert Avenue building, and income rights related to specified rental properties originally funded through Rose Bennett's separate inheritance. Nora read the first page twice because her brain refused the words the first time. 51%. Primary beneficiary. Maturity at age 35. She was 37 now. Her hands went cold. Arthur had not merely left her out of the will. If this was genuine, then some of the most valuable things Derek inherited through probate were never Arthur's to give him in the first place. They belonged to the trust. They belonged, legally, to Nora. Eli saw her face blanch. "Mom." She sat down on an overturned crate because her knees stopped cooperating. "I need you to stay very calm. That usually means something huge happened." A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh if it weren't so close to tears. "Yes, I think something huge happened." Inside the envelope was also a letter. Arthur's writing again. Slower, more fractured, but unmistakable. "If you are reading this, then either I found the courage too late or I ran out of time. I have made mistakes that no father should make. I let delay become damage. I let silence become harm. After your mother died, I placed certain assets in trust because they came from her family, and because I promised her they would pass to you when you were old enough to stand on your own. I told myself there was time. Then Derek began helping, and I was sicker than I admitted. Papers moved. Accounts changed. I wanted proof kept where he would not think to look. Samuel's room stays dry. So does the truth. There are recordings. There are originals. Take them to someone who fears the law more than family pressure. Do not show Derek first. He will smile. Then he will destroy what he can. I am sorry. He was wronged by grief, but you were wronged by me. Nora lowered the letter slowly. Eli stood so still he looked carved. Did Grandpa know? Yes, she whispered. At the end, yes. Did Uncle Derek steal? The room seemed to contract around the question. Nora looked at the boxes, the recordings, the ledgers, the survey map, the trust papers that changed the shape of years she thought she understood. Then she looked at the hidden room that had waited beneath her feet while everyone above it performed certainty. Yes, she said. I think he did. And somewhere above them, the old house creaked in the winter wind like a witness shifting before testimony. Nora did not sleep that night. She made tea she forgot to drink. She spread papers across the kitchen table in careful rows. She photographed every page using her phone, then charged the phone and photographed them again in better light. She wrote down dates, parcel numbers, notary stamps, names of banks, mentions of account transfers. Eli fell asleep on the couch around midnight with his glasses still on, a blanket over his legs and one hand still resting on the edge of Arthur's letter as if he, too, needed proof it was real. At 1:26 a.m., Nora inserted the first microcassette into the recorder. Static crackled. Then Arthur's voice filled the kitchen, weaker than she remembered but unmistakably his. Breathless. Older. Speaking as if each sentence cost him something. This is for record, he said. Date? March 11th. If anything happens, the originals are in Samuel's dry room at Marlowe. Derek does not know. He thinks I moved everything to the office safe, but he has keys there. Not here. The pause. Papers shifting. The Rose Trust should have distributed to Nora when she turned 35. It did not. I delayed after the stroke. Derek told me we needed restructuring, said tax reasons, said she had enough burdens. I signed things I should have read more carefully. He has been taking rents from Madison and Woodburn through Bennett operating accounts and calling them management reimbursements. I told him to stop. He said he was protecting the business. Arthur coughed hard. When he spoke again, the shame in his voice was worse than the illness. I let him speak like ownership was a language and silence was consent. Nora covered her mouth. Eli stirred but did not wake. Arthur continued, voice thinner now. If Nora hears this, tell her the house is not punishment. It was the only place left where I knew he would not look. He thinks old things have no value unless someone else says so. He is wrong. Then the tape clicked off. Nora sat in silence. There was not a fantasy, not a hunch, not grief rewriting facts to feel less abandoned. A recorded admission from Arthur himself, preserved underground while Derek smiled upstairs and offered to help. But recordings are one thing. Courts are another. And in the morning, when the winter light made the kitchen look harsher and more ordinary, doubt came creeping in through the cracks. What if the documents were outdated? What if the trust had been revoked? What if Arthur's voice wasn't enough? What if this room held only proof of intentions, not enforceable rights? Hope can be almost cruel when you're poor, because it asks you to imagine a better future before it has agreed to become real. Nora needed someone who could tell the difference between a miracle and a lawsuit. She called 3 lawyers before noon. The first quoted a retainer she couldn't pay and lost interest the moment she said, "estate dispute." The second had a paralegal tell her they were booked 6 weeks out. The third was a legal aid referral who said probate-adjacent trust fraud was outside current capacity. For 3 hours Nora felt the old panic returning, that familiar, punishing sensation of finding the truth and still not having the resources to do anything with it. But then she remembered Arthur's sentence, "Take them to someone who fears the law more than family pressure." So she stopped searching for probate attorney and started searching for fiduciary litigation trust accounting Cincinnati. At 2:47 p.m., she called Park and Lou Asset Recovery. An assistant said the next new client consultation was Thursday. Nora said, "Please tell Ms. Park I have original trust documents hidden by a deceased trustee, a recorded admission of diverted rents, and a pending sale risk. If she doesn't have time for a consultation, I understand. But if someone in her office can tell me whether I'm holding paper or dynamite, I'll be there in 20 minutes. There was a pause. Then the assistant said, "Can you come at 4? Nora looked at the peeling kitchen, the late sun against the frosted window, the legal envelope Arthur had marked for her, and felt the first hard edge of momentum in weeks. "Yes," she said. "I can." Evelyn Park was not at all what Nora expected. She was in her early 50s, maybe, with silver threaded through dark hair cut blunt at the jaw and glasses that made her look severe until she smiled, which was rare and therefore worth more. Her office had no motivational quotes, no decorative law books, no faux warmth. Just neat files, a brass desk lamp, and framed copies of old courthouse sketches. She wore a charcoal sweater and listened with complete stillness, which Nora immediately trusted more than sympathy. Nora laid out the documents, Arthur's letter, the survey map, and a typed list of the recordings in date order. She did not oversell, did not dramatize. She simply told the truth. About the will, about the house, about Derek's purchase offer, about the locked room. Evelyn interrupted only to ask precise questions. Original notary seal visible? Yes. Any trust revocation instrument found? Not yet. Was your mother's family independently wealthy? Not wealthy. They owned 2 rental buildings and the land under the hardware store before she married my father. Has your brother ever acted as trustee to your knowledge? Not officially. Has there been any accounting provided to you since you turned 35? Nora laughed once. No. Evelyn nodded slightly, as if a piece had clicked into place. She lifted the trust document carefully, examined the signatures, then set it down and looked at Nora over the glasses. If these originals are authentic, probate may be the least important part of your brother's problem. Nora's pulse jumped. Meaning a will only distributes what the decedent actually owns. Trust assets are governed by the trust. If your father transferred your mother's inherited interests into an irrevocable or partially irrevocable trust for your benefit, and if those assets were never lawfully distributed or terminated, then your brother may have taken control over property he had no authority to claim. Nora gripped the chair arms. Can he say Dad changed his mind? He can say many things, Evelyn replied. The law will care what he can prove. That line hit Nora like sunlight through ice. He can say many things. The law will care what he can prove. Evelyn continued, we need verification. Recorder's office. Entity filings. Tax records. Chain of title. We also need to preserve this evidence immediately. Is it real? Nora asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Evelyn did not give false comfort. I believe it is serious. I do not yet say it is winning. Those are different words. Precise. Nora nodded. In the meantime, Evelyn said, do not speak to your brother about what you found. Do not send copies. Do not threaten him. Let him remain confident. Arrogance is often the cheapest evidence to collect. But Derek made his next move before they could make theirs. The following morning Nora received a text, heard from code enforcement. Marlowe may be unsafe for occupancy if complaints start. Please don't make me get involved. No greeting. No signature. Just pressure. A minute later another message arrived. Still willing to close Friday. Last offer. Nora showed the screen to Evelyn by email. The reply came back in under 9 minutes. Do not respond. Save everything. Then, I have filed a preservation notice and requested emergency title records. Meeting tomorrow 3 p.m. Arrogance really was cheap evidence. The next 48 hours stretched like wire. Nora kept working because bills did not pause for legal suspense. She made chicken soup from a discounted pack of thighs, 1 onion, 2 carrots, and the last of the celery. She used painter's tape and plastic sheeting to seal a draft around Eli's bedroom window. She washed uniforms in cold water and hung them over chairs because the dryer tripped the breaker. Every ordinary task felt surreal now, as if another life had begun underneath this one and was slowly pushing upward. At 3 o'clock on Friday, Nora sat again across from Evelyn Park, this time with a court reporter's calm compressed into every object on the desk. Evelyn had a fresh stack of records clipped in color tabs. First, she said, the parcel issue is real. The Marlowe property includes a second legal parcel not separately highlighted in the simplified county tax summary your brother likely expected you to rely on. Not a fortune by itself, but absolutely more valuable than represented. Nora exhaled once. Second, Evelyn continued, the Rose Bennett Family Trust is authentic. We confirmed the notary, the drafting attorney, now deceased, and a memorandum of trust filed in 2002 that references your mother's inherited real estate interests. The trust was never formally revoked in the recorder's chain. Nora stopped breathing for half a second. Evelyn slid another page forward. Third, Bennett Hardware's current operating structure appears to have been reorganized after your father's stroke. We are still tracing exactly how. But several rental income streams listed in the trust supporting documents were routed through business accounts your brother controlled. There are discrepancies. Discrepancies, in Evelyn's mouth sounded like thunder held in a briefcase. So it's real, Nora whispered. Evelyn looked at her directly. Yes. It is real enough that this morning I filed a petition for trust accounting, a motion to preserve disputed assets, and notice to prevent sale or encumbrance of the Gilbert Avenue property pending review. Nora's eyes burned. She looked down because crying in front of someone so composed felt almost rude. But one tear slipped anyway and landed dark on the back of her hand. Evelyn pretended not to notice. That kindness, too, was precise. There is more, she said. Of course there was. Because buried truth rarely comes alone. We subpoenaed recent business filings. Your brother signed at least 2 certifications implying sole beneficial control over property interests that appear, based on this trust, not to have been his alone. If he knew that, it's exposure. If he didn't know that, then he was reckless in ways judges dislike. Nora let out a sound halfway between a laugh and disbelief. He thought he won, Evelyn said quietly. He hadn't. For the first time in months, maybe years, Nora felt the world tilt not away from her but back toward balance. Not completed balance. Not painless balance. But movement. Verification changes grief. Before, she had been mourning what she thought was lost. Now she understood something harsher and strangely more empowering. Much of it had been taken. And taken things can sometimes be returned. The legal fight that followed was not swift, because real justice rarely arrives with cinematic speed. It arrives in filings, records requests, deadlines, sworn statements, and the slow, grinding humiliation of people who relied on charm when paper would eventually be asked to speak. Derek's first response came through his attorney: surprise, indignation, dismissal. They called the hidden room a curious family storage space. They suggested Arthur, under heavy medication, may have been confused when recording the tapes. They claimed the trust had been informally superseded by later estate planning. Evelyn's reply was 19 pages long and attached 3 certified records, 1 parcel map, a transcript of Arthur's March 11th recording, and a demand for full accounting of rents, distributions, reimbursements, business restructuring, and any loans secured by disputed trust assets. Then came the first crack in Derek's posture. A sale he had quietly set in motion involving the hardware building stalled when the title company saw the pending dispute notice. A refinancing inquiry triggered document requests he could not neatly satisfy. And when Evelyn obtained bank records showing rental income from the Madison Road and Woodburn properties entering operating accounts marked as temporary management transfers, and later funding expenses unrelated to trust maintenance, including in one remarkable line item, part of the lease payment on Derek's BMW, the case stopped looking like sibling disagreement and started looking like what it was. Diversion. Self-dealing. Maybe worse. Vanessa called Nora on a Sunday evening, voice syrupy and strained. "This has gone too far," she said. Nora was standing over a pot of rice, wearing thick socks and one of Ben's old flannel shirts. Eli was coloring at the table. "You mean visible," Nora said. "You're embarrassing the family." "No. I'm uncovering it." Vanessa lowered her voice. "Derek says Dad wanted flexibility. The trust was outdated. Then he should have treated it like something outdated people could actually inspect." The pause. "Then, what do you want?" That question said more than any confession could have. Nora turned off the stove burner and stared out the kitchen window at snow softening the alley lights. "I want what was mine before he decided my labor was easier to erase than his theft." Vanessa inhaled sharply. "That word is reckless." "No," Nora said. "That word is catching up." She ended the call. In mediation, Derek wore navy and looked tired for the first time in his adult life. Not humbled exactly. Cornered. There is a difference. Humbled people look inward. Cornered people look for exits. He still tried charm first. "Nora," he said in the conference room before lawyers sat down, "this is insane. We can settle this like adults." She held his gaze. "Adults don't hide trust income from widows living paycheck to paycheck." His face hardened. "You always make yourself the victim. And you always call accountability drama." That line landed. She saw it. Then the lawyers entered and the masks went back on. The accounting review took 3 more weeks. 3 long, taut weeks in which Nora continued patching her ordinary life together while her extraordinary one reorganized in the background. She worked shifts, paid the minimum on the gas bill, used weather stripping and blankets to hold warmth in the house, fixed the back door latch herself with parts from a jar in the basement room, helped Eli build a solar system project out of painted foam balls. And at night, after he slept, she listened to more of Arthur's recordings. On one tape, Arthur cried. Not loudly, not theatrically. Just once, after saying Rose's name. "I told myself I was keeping peace," he said into the recorder. "But peace bought with one child's loss is only cowardice with better manners." Nora wrote that line down. Peace bought with one child's loss is only cowardice with better manners. It explained more than the trust. It explained the whole architecture of her family. The responsible daughter gets asked to wait because she can survive waiting. The louder son gets immediate accommodation because everyone fears his reaction more. That isn't peace. That's imbalance mistaken for practicality. And eventually, the bill comes due. When the preliminary accounting finally arrived, Nora read it in Evelyn's office with both hands flat on the table to keep herself steady. Over a 3-year period, more than $287,000 in net rental income attributable to trust-supported assets had been rerouted or absorbed without distribution to Nora. Some of it had covered legitimate maintenance. Much of it had not. There were undocumented management fees,